Zoom invite, so I was sitting there by myself.
Yeah, I had asked if there was some reason you weren't in.
Okay, so we're live. All right. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to listen to you today. My name is Jerry Robinson, and I'm here with Michael O'Neill, Vice Chair of the School Committee, and we are both members of the Boston School Committee. You can find the documents for today's session on the committee's webpage, bostonpublicsschools.org/school committee, under the February 8th meeting link. We'll also post a link to the documents in the chat. The meeting documents have been translated in all of the major BPS languages. Any translations that are not ready prior to the start of the session will be posted as soon as they are finalized. The committee is pleased to be offering live simultaneous interpretation in Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and American Sign Language. After I finish introducing the interpreters, we will activate the interpretation icon, the globe at the bottom of your screen. Click the icon to select your language preference. In order to access this feature, you must update to the latest version of Zoom. Please visit support.zoom.us. Our Cantonese interpreter is Anna Say. Will you please invite our speaking audience to switch to their Zoom in Cantonese?
Sure, thanks, Ms. Robinson. 大家好，我係 Anna， 我係你今日嘅廣東話同步翻譯。如果你需要係廣東話同步翻譯嘅時候咧，咁咧就請你咧就會下面見到一個地球儀，咁你就撳落去，咁你就會揀 Cantonese， 咁你就會聽到廣東話同步翻譯嘅啦。如果你聽唔到嘅話咧，即係話你嘅手機或者你嘅電腦咧係未係最新嗰個嘅軟件，咁咧你就要去 Zoom 嗰度咧去更新啦。咁你可以去Zoom US download 嗰度更新嘅。多謝你，期待為你翻譯。Thank you.
Thank you. Our Mandarin interpreter is Tina Wang. Will you please give the Zoom instructions in Mandarin?
Thank you. 欢迎大家，我是您的普通话同声翻译 Tina 王。那么今天呢，我们会有这个普通话的口译服务。稍后你会在屏幕的底部看到带有翻译字样的地球图标。如果你要是上不了 Zoom， 请更新 Zoom 软件，是这个 support 这个英文 SUPPORT， 然后一个点儿，然后那个 Zoom 那个 ZOOM 一个点儿，然后是美国 US。好，祝您今天晚上愉快。Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Our Vietnamese interpreter is V. Phung Le. Will you please give Zoom instructions in Vietnamese?
Yes, hi. Good evening. Hi, Ms. Robinson. Cảm ơn quý vị. Kính thưa quý vị, hôm nay có mặt ở ngày hôm nay, chúng ta sẽ họp meeting để nghe những gì trình bày về cái hội thảo ngày hôm nay. Kính thưa quý vị là nếu quý vị nào cần nghe thông dịch viên nói chuyện, xin bấm vào quả cầu ở dưới màn hình, bấm vào quả cầu và bấm tiếng Việt thì quý vị có thể nghe được thông dịch viên nói chuyện. Và nhớ là nếu mà quý vị có thể có cái Zoom mới nhất thì quý vị có thể xem được hết tất cả. Cảm ơn quý vị rất nhiều. Thank you.
Thank you. Our ASL interpreters are Kelly Muskoff and Travis Wynn. Will you please introduce yourselves? Kelly?
Hi, my name is Kelly Muskoff. I'm an ASL interpreter.
Thank you. Thank you all for assisting us today. We will now activate the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to remind everyone to speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, and I want to thank you for joining me today. I was originally scheduled to be joined by our fellow member, Mr. Tron. but he was unable at the last minute to make it. And so we are getting something right away on the chat. And so if we could double check, is there a Spanish interpreter this evening?
No, not this evening.
Not this evening, okay. But we are trying to have Spanish interpreting services at all these sessions, right? So we were just not able to get someone for this evening?
That's correct.
Okay, so I do apologize if there are any folks participating in this session this evening, if they were in need of interpretation services in Spanish. Ms. Sullivan, do we have Spanish interpreters for other sessions?
We do, and I can put those dates in the chat.
Okay, please do that. Thank you. So thank you, Ms. Robinson, for joining us, for joining me this evening. And we're here today because the school committee, it is our duty, it is our job to represent the vision and values of the entire Boston community, all those who have an interest in Boston Public Schools. We have a variety of ways of trying to remain engaged in the community, and this is one of the ways that we want to go about doing it. What we are trying to do is talk about our goals and our guardrails in the context of the strategic plan that we have worked on fairly extensively in the past year. In light of that, as a committee, we've tried to narrow down to goals and guardrails, and that's what we want to talk about today to get folks' input on that. What we aren't here to talk about today is about current issues such as reopening, school policing, and other matters. If you want to talk about those in the context of our 5-year goals and guardrails, absolutely that's the place to have this conversation. If you want to discuss those issues in the context of getting a resolution to a current issue, then we have other venues for that, including the public comment portion of our regular school committee meetings, and we have our next one coming up on February 24th. As most folks know, we have those several times a month. So what we're trying to do in the context of these meetings, though, is to step back a little bit and kind of think from a bigger picture. As we say, to help improve our present, we have to make a plan for the future. And that's what we're trying to do with these sessions. So we do have a couple of goals for this evening. And we want to make sure that everyone does have a chance to speak. So when you do, please do it one at a time. You can put it in the chat, as some have done already. The chats will be collected as and consolidating, and our chair will be reporting back on these sessions, both at our meeting on the 24th and then our next meeting in March. We're going to be thinking about what we've learned from it and how this will apply to some metrics that we're working on as well. We also have a Google form to collect feedback as well. So variety of ways. If you want to speak up today, that's great. Yeah, we would really welcome that. If you want to talk to the chat, you can do that as well. Regardless, your input is important to us because we do listen. And I do want to note that Ms. Sullivan has posted that Spanish interpretation will be provided tomorrow, February 9th at 3:30 p.m., as well as some sessions beyond that. And again, I'm sorry if you were in need of Spanish interpretation services tonight and we were unable to provide that for you. As you know, as regular attendees to school committees members know, school committee meetings know, the school committee is the first public body in the city to offer a variety of interpretation services. We started that at the direction of our chair, Ms. Oliver Davila, when she became chair in December, and now we are working out the system to provide it as in many, provide interpretation services in as many of the main languages that our BPS community speaks. This is still new for us to do it. And so we thank the interpreters who are working this evening, and we thank members of the community if you are in need of interpretation services, for letting us know how you think it is going and if it is working well for you. And again, thanks to the interpreters who are providing tonight. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about tonight. As I said, it is both goals and guardrails. So the goals represent the community's highest needs, the highest leverage vision for what students should know and are able to do. The school committee had some extensive sessions, retreats to talk about this in public settings. A number of you who are on the phone tonight or on this session tonight also took part and listened and made comments as we really talked through about what our potential goals could be. We selected goals that focused on early literacy, number one, achievement for English language learners, achievement for students with disabilities, critical thinking with math, science, and literacy, and career and college readiness. If you think about it, we kind of did a couple of key touch points in our students' progression, how they start, where they are in the middle, and then how they finish up, along with talking about some particular populations that were really needed. We wanted to make sure to focus on achievement for them. So, but it's important for us to be able to narrow down what our potential goals are, because as they say, a school committee that focuses on everything is focused on nothing. So it was really hard for us to focus down on these 5 goal areas. And we're trying to focus on student successes or student outcomes, not adult inputs, but student outcomes. And so as we narrowed it down, and it was a significant amount of conversation to get to these, we believe that these are the ones that will have a significant impact on students' abilities to be successful no matter what they do. I will also say, this is not replacing the strategic plan that we did. So when we talk about in the strategic plan that you know, our goal, our first and foremost goal is changing the opportunity, eliminating the achievement gap. We are not getting rid of that goal. This is taking it and focusing on student outcomes that we believe will work towards doing that. So that's why we're putting up these potential goals of early literacy, achievement for English learners, achievement for students with disabilities, critical thinking in math, science, and literacy, and finally, career and college readiness. If we're now going to talk about guardrails.
Okay.
So go ahead, Ms. Robinson.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. I was remiss to introduce our superintendent, who I know is only here for another 5 minutes before she has to go back to another meeting. So I wanted just to give her a moment to speak.
Well, thank you, Ms. Robinson, and thank you, Mr. O'Neill, for being here in these listening sessions. I think this is a great way to try to focus and align the work of the school committee to the strategic plan. And, you know, there's just a lot of work ahead, and listening to the community is something that is a value of ours in the strategic plan to amplify voices and cultivate trust. So we're really here tonight to do that, and appreciative of everybody who showed up. So thank you so much to everyone who's here tonight, and also to the both of you for your leadership in guiding this conversation.
Thank you. All right, I'm just going to go on to look at the guardrails. So the guardrails represent the community's values and are not negotiable expectations that must be honored in all of the school system's work. The school committee selected guardrails that focus on, number 1, student voice and family engagement. Number 2, community partnerships. Number 3, equity and opportunity gaps. Number 4, diverse and effective staffing. And number 5, social, emotional, and physical supports. When these guardrails are honored, they help create the condition for student success student-wide. So once the goals and guardrails are fully adopted as a school committee, we will redesign everything we do to monitor these priorities and focus our work around them. We will redesign what our meetings look like to focus more time on ensuring that the goals are met and the guardrails are honored. We will focus a greater percentage of our time each month on monitoring student growth to ensure that we are moving in the right direction. We will evaluate the budget on its alignment with the goals and guardrails. We'll evaluate the superintendent based on the accomplishments of goals and adherence to guardrails. The community's priority vision, our goals, and the community's prioritized values, our guardrails, will be at the center of everything we do. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Yep. And we're given a chance for some of our interpreters to catch up as well. They have asked us to go as slow as possible. So, and also for folks in the public, you will see that we are learning doing this process as well with multiple screens moving. And it is not unlike the learning process our teachers have been undergoing and our students have been undergoing as we're in remote learning, and now our students coming back to school and our teachers are doing synchronous teaching. So we're all learning this together. So with that in mind, would love to begin with our first question. And I've already noticed a few folks are putting comments in the chat about early literacy, and so that's going to be great. So I would love to hear you give some voice to that, because this is how school committee members learn. And even though Ms. Robinson and I are the two school committee members on tonight, the information is being shared with all of our fellow members. And as we said, our chair, Ms. Oliver Davila, will be giving a summary at a school committee meeting as well. So your feedback is really valuable, and it is how we listen and how we learn. So please do speak up tonight. So with that in mind, let's begin with our first question. And we do want to have a space for as many people to hear from as many people as possible. So we do ask you to keep your responses and comments to roughly about 2 minutes, if that makes sense for you, to make space for other voices. And we've divided this into several different sections. So the first is going to be talking about the goal areas. And we're going to be asking, what of the 5 goal areas is most important to you? So of the 5 that we outlined, and again, we've already had one person send a chat message about early literacy. Of these goals on early literacy, achievement for English learners, achievement for student and disabilities, critical thinking for math, science, and literacy, and career and college readiness. What is the most important to you? Which one resonates with you the most? I'd like to open this up now for folks who would like an opportunity to speak. And as you're thinking about these 5 goals, the other question is, as you think about the goals, how can BPS do a better job of partnering with families and communities to accomplish these goals? So who would be the first that would like to speak? If you do, simply raise your hand in Zoom, and that is, you go down to the participant list, and next to your name, you have the opportunity to raise your hand. And Ms. Sullivan will call on folks who would like to make a comment. And I do want to say there are some folks that I'm sure are on the line that are regular participants at our school committee meetings and may feel they want to hold back because they say, let's give everyone a chance to speak. Don't hesitate to speak as well. So we have a comment in the chat already. And so I want to move it over to be able to give voice to that. So all of the goals are important, but early literacy is the key for everything going forward. So thank you for that comment. That is important. it actually mimics a part of the conversation Ms. Robinson and Superintendent that the school committee was having on that issue, right?
Exactly.
Right. So if anyone would like to raise their hand to speak, there was a prior comment as well. Let me back in the chat. There was a prior comment that said, this should be shared with every family in regard to the mention of early the mention of early literacy should be shared with every family.
Yes.
And that's a great comment because it does take the whole family to get involved to help with early literacy. Ms. Robinson happens to be a specialty area of yours, right? Our young students,
Yeah.
your career to.
Yes, and exactly. And we're not just talking about preschool literacy, we're really talking about from infancy all the way up through third grade, because all of those years contribute to a child's vocabulary, their experiences, and getting them to third grade to be really fluent readers with lots of opportunity and experiences to draw upon. So yes.
Great, thank you. So we're going to call on someone who has risen their hand to speak, and we'll do that in just a second. But I do absolutely want to give voice to a comment that was additionally put in, who said we have a great number of Cape Verdean, Cabo Verdean parents in Boston Public Schools. So please consider having Cabo Verdean interpreter. Thank you for that. That actually is something we are working on. Superintendent, correct? I believe we're also working on Haitian Creole.
Yes, we do have Haitian Creole, and we are still working on the Cabo Verde.
Great, thank you. So, but thank you for giving voice to that. So I'd now like to call on Nicole Riley, I believe, has risen their hand, would like to speak.
Good evening. It's a really hard call between number 3 and 4 because I have a special ed student, but when I think about the overall critical thinking with math, science, and literacy, BPS has parent essentials that are run to help us learn about that link that I put in with the DESI standards about where each class grade should be. And I think the pre-K one is very important, but I just learned, and I'm a mom whose oldest is 26 and whose youngest is 4. I just realized, or was taught on Saturday within 2 hours, why the Turk method is so important. And I can remember having a hard time with this when it was introduced back when my oldest was in elementary school at the Agassiz. So I really feel like the critical thinking with math, science, and literacy is important. And I want to applaud what the Parent Essentials through Parent University is doing.
Great, well, thank you for that. And thank you for that feedback. Yeah, these are not mutually exclusive. Right, so it is not necessarily that one is more important than the other, because we think of them almost as building blocks all the way through. So thank you for calling out both number 3, achievement for students with disabilities, and the critical thinking method. And it's interesting, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you said you have a child who's 26 and a child who's 4, so you certainly have a range of ages there to think about input. So thank you for that, Ms. Riley. Ms. Robinson, any comments?
No, I would agree. I think that, I feel that all 5 of these are so important. It's hard just to ask anyone to choose just one, because they all do relate one to the other. I'm glad to hear that Parent University is doing a work that's really helping parents to understand what is going on and giving them skills to be able to support their learners also, because it really is, it's a family affair. It's all of us. I mean, school classrooms alone can't do this work. Our community needs to help. Parents need to help. And the more that everyone knows and understands, the better off all our students will be. So, I mean, I really thank parents for stepping up and wanting to understand about this work. And I hope they will also encourage their fellow parents to get involved, because we know the importance that of parent support. So when we get to the guardrails and we talk about that, there as well. We really understand that it's really important for everyone to participate. I also want to take a quick moment to recognize that also on the call with us this evening are two other school committee members, our chair, Alex, and our newest member, Imani, is here also as well, listening in. And you all will get to meet him, I think, at our meeting on the 24th. So welcome and thank you both for attending.
Yes, we look forward to our newest member joining us at the next meeting. A graduate of the Boston Public Schools and lives and works in East Boston as the general counsel for the East Boston Neighborhood Health Services. And a future parent of BPS is
Two little ones.
Right, two little ones, a little bit too young for BPS right now, but we're delighted he's joining us. Was recently appointed by Mayor Walsh after being recommended by the citizens, being one of several who were recommended by the Citizens Advisory Panel, who interviews all applicants for Boston School Committee. So welcome. I do also want to note that Cabo Verdean interpretation will be provided tomorrow, February 9th at 3:30 and Saturday, February 13th at 10 a.m. So as I said at the outset, we are still evolving and growing our interpretation services and trying to reach as many of our BPS parents as possible. So I want to go back to Ms. Riley's comment, because it was also pretty important what she had said about having Parent University involved. And Ms. Riley, if you're still with us and want to address, I'd love to hear if you have been through Parent University and how in particular you think this work and the goals could be expanded through the work of Parent University.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I've been involved with Parent University since my oldest was in 4th grade, as I mentioned, at the Agassiz is when I, first learned of family engagement. Parent Essentials used to be like, 4 hours every Saturday for 6 to 8 weeks. It was very intense, and you would learn a number of things. In a virtual setting, what's happening is still phenomenal work. And so they are broken up into different chunks. There are different topics. There's learning of the math. There is school site council training. There is how to engage and retain parent leadership. The one thing, in the positive that I'm mentioning, the one thing that I would love to see it flourish is we're not utilizing the technology advancements that we have, such as text messaging out to Boston Public School families of when these engagements are happening, or even real-time links sent to the parents who may have already registered for them. And so I really feel like we can enhance the engagement if we could just promote the awareness a lot more. Sometimes you have to hunt and peck and find.
Ms. Riley, you're absolutely, you see Ms. Robinson and I both nodding our head on that.
Right.
You're dead on, and it actually kind of gets into, as we start to have the conversation about guardrails, you're going to see family engagement. The school committee's been doing a lot of thinking of how we can more authentically engage with each of the various constituencies and part of the mosaic or the individual fabric that makes up the mosaic that is the BPS community. Because we have parents, we have teachers, we have our professionals, we have our other school employees, we have our students, we have our community members, we have our partners who we work with, all of which help our students along their journey. And thinking about how we authentically engage with each of them and get feedback, and as you say, make sure that they know about it and reach out to them consistently with the links and the texts is really important. And then even as we talk about interpretation services, each of the main languages that our students and our families speak, not having Spanish language available this evening, having a schedule for at least one coming up, but certainly trying to have it for more as well. This is important work for us. And so as we get to the guardrail piece and start to talk about, you will see the family and community engagement is an area the school committee has spent a lot of time talking about, right, Ms. Robinson?
Absolutely. It's, you know, it's so much of the critical work that needs to be done. And I think, you know, I know that we've been doing a lot of work, but particularly after this year of the pandemic, I feel that there's no school, no teacher that hasn't had significant parent engagement through a virtual world. And, you know, I am hoping that we will only increase that once we are back in person, and that we will continue the level and even increase the level of communication with families, making sure that families and parents are able to join the school level equity roundtables, to look at the various parent-led organizations, to making sure that people who may not have in the past participate will now find ways of being engaged, so that, you know, we know that we will only get stronger if the voices of all parents are heard and part of how we move forward. So yes, I think, you know, like I said, I'm 100% behind all forms of parent engagement. As a parent myself many years ago in the district of a special needs child, I know how important it was, and also how difficult it was at times to have a level of, you know, collegial interaction with parts of the district. So I am hoping that we are moving forward on making things easier for families. I'm hoping that as we do more and more with the interpretation, that it will all become much more natural part of what we do, because every family, every voice is important, and it's really up to us to make sure that families really do see their seat at the table and take it.
Right. So Ms. Wiley, thank you for your feedback regarding the goals, and also some of the advice you've given us as we get into guardrails. You are one step ahead, and so thank you for that. Did we cover the feedback you wanted to give us, or I want to make sure to give you ample opportunity. I'm not sure if Ms. Farley still has, okay, she has, okay, great, so set, thank you, Ms. Farley. So before we move on to our next question, I want to give other folks an opportunity to speak if they would like to, and give us some feedback on how they feel about these goals. As I said, early literacy, starting our youth young on what we think is what the school committee, based upon feedback received to date, feels is really the key building block that everything else comes off of. Particular focus on achievement for our English language learners and achievement for our students with disabilities. And then for all of our students, critical thinking with math, science, and literacy. And to us, that was pretty much the stepping stone at the middle school years. And then finally, career and college readiness, which means we don't want just our students to graduate from BPS, but we want them ready to graduate, to succeed in college or succeed in their career if they decide to go straight to that path, or their college and career together. We have to feel ownership for our students, not just K through 12 or pre-K through 12, but really through 16 years and beyond. And this is important to the school committee. So we did a lot of time talking about career and college readiness, as opposed to just putting, you know, for example, the high school graduation rate. And so anyway, before we move on to guardrails, I just want to check one more time if anyone would love to give us some feedback on the potential goals that we outlined. Or do you think there's anything that we're missing or that we should be talking about more as we look at these potential goals? Ms. Robinson, do you have any comments about the conversation we had about the potential goals and anything, you know, some of the things that we thought about putting in, but decided it did make sense? Again,
Yeah.
part of the conversation was to say very focused on student outcomes,
Yeah.
not adult inputs. as we
Input,
call it.
yeah. You know, and I said, I think as you look at each of the 5 goals, if you think of the multitude of things that go into getting to that goal, so that there's so much. I mean, if you unpacked early literacy, you know, as I said, we're going back to, you know, what's happening to our children before they get to BPS, our, you know, our infants and toddlers, our folks that our countdown to kindergarten folks are working with and are working on the earliest parts of literacy, so that our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds are coming into BPS with the best of backgrounds, because we know that a lot of our children start out ready to be successful, but something happens along the way. And then by the time they get to 3rd grade, we're seeing some of that early success erode. So our issue around early literacy is making sure we are connecting all the dots from infancy straight through to 3rd grade. So what's going on in 1st and 2nd grade literacy? You know, I think the heartbreak for me is when we look at high school kids who are coming into high school and not reading, you know, and they have gone to school for all 12 years of their lives. And somehow along the line in 2nd or 3rd grade, something wasn't happening and we weren't paying full attention. So we are going to be monitoring the data at each grade level to understand, you know, who isn't being successful, and not just noting that, but looking at what are we doing? What are we doing over the vacations or during the summer? How are we connecting with that family, with that child, so that we can, as we saying, you know, close up all of the holes to make sure that our kids are being successful. So I think it's going to help us to be more laser focused on what is happening from year to year. Also, when we talk about achievement of English learners or students with disabilities, when we begin to look at the diversity of our students, there are numbers of Black and Latinx students amongst that as well. So we're not just talking about, you know, we're not talking about small subsets. In BPS, those are large groups of our students and large diverse groups of our students. So we're hoping that if we are really laser focused on our kids who are most at risk, again, it's going to improve the outcomes and the experiences for all. And that's our issue. All means all. We're not talking about leaving any group of students behind, but particularly our most marginalized students. Traditionally, we're wanting to make sure that all of the goals that we're looking at are going deep into looking at what are the programs, what are the opportunities that we are providing to make sure that all of our students really are having the best experience possible. So there's a lot that's going in here. It's hard to figure out what's not really part of those 5 goals that we will be looking at, but these are really going to be the markers of our success to be able to turn around our district and to look at the, you know, the opportunity and achievement gaps issue.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And I want to call out one particular thing you said when you said we'll be looking at the data. So some folks have noticed that there are not metrics attached to these goals and to guardrails. And that was a very specific decision of the school committee as we did this work. We will ultimately have metrics attached to them. But the thought process was, as we laid out these goals and guardrails, to stop and have a conversation and get input on these. And then to make sure we are directionally accurate. And then the next step will be to come up with metrics so that ultimately when it is presented, you know, there will be another stage of this work being presented publicly by our chair at school committee meetings. There will be metrics attached to it, potential metrics attached to it, but we thought that was putting the cart before the horse.
Too soon, yes.
Right, let's do the goals and guardrails and have these conversations to get input from folks. Okay, so Ms. Robinson, do you want to move on now to the guardrails area?
Yes, certainly.
Even though Ms. Riley got us started right away on our first one.
So our question is, which of the 5 guardrail areas is most important to you? You know, how can BPS best partner with families and community to honor it? So again, we are stressing that this is a both and. It's internal to the district, but we really need to understand what families and communities how they want to partner with us to do this work. So of the 5 guardrail areas, student voice and family engagement, community partnerships, equity and opportunity gaps, diverse and effective staffing, social, emotional, and physical supports. Which one most resonates for you and why? How can BPS do a better job of partnering with families and communities to honor this guardrail? Who will be the first to share?
And as folks are thinking of raising their hand and speaking on this topic, I do want to mention that this is a perfect example of how, even when the school committee started working on this, at our retreat sessions, we had some folks speak up to us and give their input. Yes, Mr. Mott, I'm thinking of you if you're on the phone today, and others. For example, really saying, you know, we really think it is critical. We understand this is just a piece of the strategic plan, but we think it's critical that you continually to call out, for example, about the achievement gap. And we have adapted this to talk about that. And so it specifically is called out in the equity and opportunity gap that BPS will implement with fidelity, opportunity and achievement gap closing practices that are research-based, data-driven, district, school, and classroom levels. And so we do listen to the feedback that we receive and adjust accordingly. So when we say we're listening, we really are. And so
listening.
So either raise their hand or put a comment in the chat about what the potential guardrails are.
Yeah. I would love to hear from families, you know, that about what their experiences have been during COVID, or whether they have been introduced to new partners or partnerships or programs that they want to make sure that we are aware of, or that are continued as we move forward. Because we know that this past year has certainly offered us a variety of experiences unlike what we've ever had in the district. So how do we learn from those as we go back to, you know, in-person opportunities?
It's interesting you say that, Ms. Robinson, because I think about our conversation under community partnerships, where it says BPS will work with community partners to prepare students for the unlimited global and local opportunities. And I think of the work of the school committee the past few years to encourage our students and make it more equitably based, that students have the opportunities to travel internationally, which is so much more than it was before, which is critical for our students who are going to be participating in a global economy. But it's also important for our students, particularly our elementary school students, to have the opportunity, equitable opportunity, to participate. You know, the city is a classroom, the region is a classroom, the world is a classroom. You know, we think about our students working with partners anywhere from, you know, the historical sites that are across the city, the museums that are across the city, but also working with Boston Ballet, you know, our arts partners, our athletic partners, our after school and beyond partners, our summer school partners, the Y, the boys and girls clubs, all these folks who are critical in helping provide the full range of services for our students.
Yeah. I also think a lot about student voice, and I know, you know, with BSAC, we have a strong way that we hear from our high school students, but would love to look at ways that we are making sure the voices of our elementary and middle school students are also being heard, maybe by way of families, of helping to make sure that those students are heard, because a lot of those kids have wonderful ideas. They're very astute observers, and they are very clear about what has and hasn't worked for them as well, and really want to make sure that we are honoring student voice at all levels and not waiting until they are high school before we feel that their voices are important.
And so student voice and family engagement, they're both important pieces. And so from the superintendent this year, making a commitment in the budget to have family liaisons at all of our schools now, which is so important. But also the work that we do at school committee, whenever we have school leaders in front of us, where we as a school committee are asking those school leaders, do you have an active school site council? Is your school site council represented on the citywide parents council? Do you have a representative to the SPED PAC, the Parents Advisory Council for Students with Disabilities? And if it's a high school, do you have BSAC representatives? The more we use the bully pulpit of the school committee to push the schools to have those representative to those important groups that really do, they become more powerful when they are speaking for all students or families that have students with disabilities, or the citywide parents councils that they're representing all of our 128 schools. Not just some with particularly strong school site councils. And we know how hard it can be for parents to be involved at the school level. You're working 2 jobs, your child is going to school in a different neighborhood of the city. It becomes hard to make it to parent meetings, that type of thing. There could potentially be language challenges as well. And so it is incumbent upon the district to do all they can to be creative in how they reach out to families. And I think the superintendent recommending to us the investment in family liaisons in every single one of our schools is an important step in that regard. A passion of yours, Ms. Robinson.
Yes, yeah. I think for me, the issue around diverse and effective staffing is so critical. In terms of, I know that in this past year, we have hired a number of new nurses as well as new social workers and others, and have been parent liaisons, and have been happy to hear about the diversity in hiring, that we are hiring more people that speak of diversity of languages and represent the many different constituents that are in BPS. I mean, I think we've known and have heard people repeat many times over that it's important for a child to have a teacher at some point in their career that looks like them. And I know for some of our children, they see that every year, every day. Many of our white children have probably gone through our district with a minimal number of teachers of color, but that's also the experience, unfortunately, for more of our children of color. And I've heard over and over again from kids and families who talk about the teachers that look like them, the teachers who are culturally like them, that speak their language, that share their family backgrounds, who become inspiration for our kids. And we want this for all of our students. We want every child to have people in their school lives that are there being part of their cheering section and that they know that they can relate to. And so it's really tantamount on all of us to make sure that we are reaching out and creating a very diverse district. So we will continue to monitor the effectiveness of the hiring practices and looking at the diversity within schools.
I think that's really a critical viewpoint. I think the district has done nice work of improving the Office of Human Capital and changing the hiring practices so they hire earlier in the cycle now. We've seen the outreach to ensure as diverse a pool as possible has been really, really helpful. And we've seen great strides there, but we still have a long way to go. There's no question about that. And I also think we should talk for a minute, Ms. Robinson, about the social, emotional, and physical supports for our students.
Absolutely.
It is so critical. We know it is, and particularly in this time of the pandemic and the remote learning, the loss of the social interaction, the isolation that our students are facing, and our staff, by the way, all of us, but in particularly our students, not having that ability to talk with someone at a locker, to talk at the cafeteria table, to talk at the bus, build those other supports. It is really impacting our students quite a bit. We're very concerned about the emotional health of our students right now in this time of isolation, in this time of remote learning. there are some national trends in this regard that are deeply troubling. And I do know in Boston, for example, that, the superintendent, for example, Clark County, Nevada, and I hate to bring up this topic, but it's important to address difficult topics. So Clark County, Nevada has had 20 student suicides over the past year. And in talking with the superintendent there, a lot of it is from the isolation that students are facing. And I do know the superintendent, BSAC, raised this issue to the superintendent in December, and she instituted a hotline for students. So we've had a number of calls for students to have someone to talk to. But reaching out, and with all of our counselors, the increase over the past couple of years in school nurses, and guidance counselors, and social workers, and school psychologists, all of these folks together affect the social, emotional, and the physical well-being of our students. If those pieces aren't all in place, along with our students being transported to school on time, being fed properly, being in a clean environment, all of those pieces are necessary for a student to be in a place to learn. And if those other pieces don't work, how can you possibly be in a position to learn? And so I think the district has really recognized that, and that's why we wanted to put this on as one of the specific guardrails. Ms. Robinson, do you have some thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that I've been happy to hear, and I hope will continue once we go back in person, is the number of supports to families that have happened during the period of COVID, being able to connect with counselors, et cetera, over the internet. And the fact that, because you can't always get away from work to go to a school for an hour or two, but by having a variety of ways that families can connect, hopefully both the district is learning more and families feel that they have more ability to connect quicker with the professionals that they need to. And so again, in a big district like ours, it's often hard to make sure that everybody is doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. And so I feel like, as we are growing these departments and this work, it's going to be important to look at how it's being managed at the district level so that there is equity and opportunity at all schools. I saw in the chat that there was a concern that even though the district has started equity roundtables, that all schools are not doing them on a monthly basis. Some are choosing to do them quarterly, et cetera. So again, I feel like the district needs to be very clear, particularly when we're coming to these things around social emotional supports, the parent engagement, that, as we are looking at these guardrails, that again, we're going to need to look at the data. We're going to need to hear from families. So if families are giving feedback that they feel that their schools are not giving them what they need, we need to be able to move forward with that. Because again, if we want to build trust, then we have got to act in ways that families feel that their concerns are being heard and that the district is working together for them. So I really feel that all 5 of these guardrails go together in so many ways, but it will be tantamount to hear from families as they tell us what they see working and is not working as we are looking at that, because the more eyes and ears, and again, they are experiencing it one-on-one in their schools in ways that we can't be in 125 schools and know that school A is doing something, but school B is doing it differently. We really do need to rely on hearing back from parents so that we can understand how best to make sure that they feel this is all working together for them.
Yeah, Ms. Robinson, it's interesting you bring up that point, and thank you for one of the participants in bringing up in the chat about some schools doing it monthly, some schools doing it quarterly, because we have 2 different things going on, right? We have the district recommending best practices and encouraging, but we're also a district that respects and honors and has a history of providing a certain level of autonomy to our schools. And In fact, close to 40% of our schools have one type or another of autonomy between pilot schools, innovation schools, Horace Mann in-district charter schools. And those schools, you know, by the nature of their agreement with the district that has been approved over time, they have autonomy to do certain things their way, and we can encourage them to follow. For example, the school committee has been very vocal the past couple of years in asking every school that has a level of autonomy when they come back in for reauthorization to accept and follow the code of conduct and the focus on restorative justice. And I think we have changed how we approach student discipline across the entire district by doing that, even with schools that have autonomy when they come in for renewals. But we're trying to, you know, if you are respecting and honoring autonomy, then you also have to allow schools to decide, you know, when they are going to do things, as much as the district may recommend a best practice of doing it every month. I want to give voice as well. Thank you for folks who are putting comments in the chat. And there was one comment, I really hope we will be able to continue attending meetings virtually post-COVID. It has increased my engagement by about 3,000%. I love that. Yes, someday, we all know starting Zoom meetings at 7 or 8 in the morning and finishing them at 9 or 10 at night. It has certainly changed the way we engage. We take time that previously was spent commuting as an example, and now doing Zoom. I think everyone is going to be adapting after the fact as we slowly Unfortunately, we are learning from the epidemiologists, there's no magic switch that is going to be flipped and all of a sudden we're back to quote unquote normal. This is going to be a gradual evolution process, but we will also be learning some of the best practices. And you know, the ability to hold these Zoom meetings and our school committee meetings in Zoom and now have literally more than 500-600 people watching and participating, and you know, up to 100 people giving public comment in school committee meetings is very different from what we experienced beforehand. And so we're going to try to figure out how to marry some of these best practices together. I believe there's a new message that has been added as well. Okay. There was also a comment that said if the district was authentic about increasing family engagement, why then is there only 3 employees in the department that manages Office of Student, Family, and Community Advancement? Interesting question. You know, something that will be explored, feedback back to the district, and will come up at a regular school committee meeting. Thank you for giving us a question that we'll use in the budget hearings coming up. But I will also say the district is obviously making a substantial new investment. The superintendent has recommended a substantial new investment in family engagement and family liaison. So we will see, we'll ask that question at one of the budget hearings coming up. And thank you for highlighting that for us. Ms. Robinson, that looks like the comments we have received about guardrails. Should we move on to?
I think we should move on to question number 3. Thank you. But remember that you can always continue to add questions, even if you think of something after we've moved on, and there will be a place on the website where you can also provide feedback. Thank you.
And so the last question we want to ask folks is, what is the one thing you're willing to commit to that would support the success of our students in Boston Public Schools? You saw in Guardrails, for example, we talk about community engagement and family engagement. We talk about community partnerships. We talk about focusing on the social, emotional, physical health of our students. In the goals piece, we talked about the emphasis on early literacy, about our English language learning to our students with disabilities, the science, math, and reading, critical thinking skills, college and career readiness. This is not just the school committee doing the work. This is not just the district staff. As hard as they do work, the folks in the bowling building, they're incredibly diligent and dedicated. And so on all our staff in our 128 schools, including our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our nurses, our counselors, our school psychologists, but also our cafeteria workers, our custodians, our bus drivers, our monitors. All of these folks together are committed to trying to help our students, but it takes more than that. It takes our community as well to help make it happen. So we're looking for folks to just think about, is there something you think you could do to commit to helping support the success of our students in Boston Public Schools? Ms. Robinson, do you have some thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'd like to wait and allow some of our listeners in if they would want to talk first. Do we have anybody with a question or anything in the chat? Well,
So, Ms.
I will
Robinson,
say,
do we know, is Mr. Mudd on today?
no, he was on, but he had to, he sent me a text. He was on, but he left to go to a GBH meeting at 6. There are about 5 conflicting things going on this evening. So that's where he is, but I'm sure he's going to catch up with us at another meeting. So,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were
No,
about to
I
say
was
something.
thinking, for me, I think, you know, again, if I were a parent, I guess, I think the number one thing that I would want to do would be to be laser focused on what is going on at my school. You know, what are the opportunities for students? How am I being communicated with? I mean, I hear so much from parents who continue to say, I didn't know that was happening. You know, I didn't know about that meeting. I don't know about that program. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, and I figure one of our most important things is the issue of communication. And, you know, and how can we communicate better so that we are not overwhelming families? But how can we make sure that, you know, people at each school know where to go, whether it's their school website or whatever, and that somebody is really going to place on there all of the information that they need to know. And I know that the information is different from grade level to grade level. You know, how would we make sure that it's all there? You know, how do we make sure that parents can even partner together so that they can have buddies? You know, some way that, you know, we are making that, to me, is where the first step is, that informed parents are going to send to school children that, you know, that they are being laser focused on and making sure their children are getting what they need. But I want to make sure we are making sure that, you know, through translation, through whatever, that we are making sure all parents have all of the information that they need.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be parents that don't know about exam schools or summer school opportunities, et cetera. We shouldn't have that, but we still do. So the question is, how do we make sure at every school that that school is doing the best job it can to make sure it keeps their parents informed?
Yeah. So it's interesting to say that we're getting some feedback in the chat about, I wouldn't worry about overwhelming as much as informing. And that's what you know, you're concerned about the overwhelming piece, but also the informing. There's a lot going on. And when you're a parent with child or children in the school system, and particularly if you're in multiple schools, it's a lot to keep up with. And particularly as we have all adapted to this new way, right, of remote, or some may be hybrid. We're very glad this week that more of our students are back in class. I had the biggest smile on my face at 7:15 this morning in downtown Boston when I had a BPS bus right in front of me in traffic. It was actually a little bit of traffic, which was nice to see, and it was a BPS bus, and it had a big smile on my face because that meant some more of our students were back in class today. More of our high esteemed students in particular, and there will be more coming up in a couple more weeks and a couple of weeks after that. And It's been a lot of work by the superintendent and the teachers union working together to making sure that that our students are starting to get back. But that again is part of a lot of information going to parents right now. And when you think about the multiple language aspect as well, it's hard to think about how we communicate with our parents and our families so that they are informed, they have the information they need to have to make important decisions for their children, but not overwhelming as well. And as we think about, and the feedback we're getting about this is really helpful right in here. For example, talking points doesn't allow me to communicate with parents in my children's school. For me to communicate with, this is limited to staff only who are bilingual. Okay, meaning I can't communicate with our parents directly to network within a school that is 62% Latin. Interesting. So that's great feedback to think about in terms of the family engagement. How can we help our school communities network with each other as well? That's an interesting thought, Ms. Robinson, right?
Yeah, and also as I think about our community partners, we have so many different community partners who are also connecting with families and kids and, you know, before and after school and in school programs as well. Are we making sure they also have the information so that they can be, you know, a double reinforcer to make sure that, you know, families are being, you know, given the information they need. Sometimes you have to get that information from 2 or 3 different sources before you may have enough to think what I need to act upon, et cetera. But that we shouldn't just be putting it out there in one way and hoping that it gets to where it needs to go, that we really need to utilize all of our partnerships to help us to do a better job. We've got community newspaper, community radio, the churches, you know, all of these are partners with us. So we've got to make sure we are utilizing them to help us.
And just as you talk about, I agree with those suggestions, particularly some of the alternative methods that maybe we haven't as strongly utilized in the past. But you were also talking about the need to focus at the individual school level. And so as we bring that up across our district, I think that is what the school committee is trying to do with this work on goals and guardrails. Because what we envision doing from this, when we do align with the community on 5 goals and 5 guardrails, hopefully it becomes part of our public vernacular and even our language that we use when we're in planning sessions of, is this something that has to do with our goals, or does it have something that to do with our guardrails, or is it something that we're legally required to do, such as on an innovation plan for a school? Well, if it's not one of those 3, then it's taken away from the effort. We need to laser focus, to use your terms, Ms. Robinson. We need, as a school community and school committee community, to laser focus in on those student outcomes that we can most impact, because that's what's going to provide better opportunity for our students and our families across the entire district. When we can laser focus in on those goals, laser focus in on those guardrails to make sure we are always saying, is this impacting, for example, early literacy, or is this impacting the social, emotional, physical health of our students? If it's not, and I'm just picking one in each of those, or it's not something we're legally required to do, such as vote on the budget or vote on the superintendent's evaluation or vote on an innovation plan for an innovation school. If it's not a legal requirement or a goal or a guardrail, then we shouldn't be focused on it, because we're trying to focus to improve student outcomes to reach the goals that we had set in our 5-year strategic plan. And this will be a living, breathing document. It will change over time. We may realize that we're missing something in the goals, or we may be missing something in the guardrails, or something may become so part of what we're doing that we don't need to call it out and we can focus on something else. So it's a living, breathing document that adjusts over time. But hopefully we as a school committee can follow best practices of other school boards across the country who have been doing this work and have laser focused in on goals and guardrails, student outcomes, and adult inputs. Focus in on those. Spend our time as a committee focused in on that.
Yes.
That becomes clearer with our relationship with our superintendent. It allows our superintendent to be more effective. And by the way, doing it all with metrics. And just as we expect our students to do homework, to take tests, and so on and so forth, and show progress, so too should we be holding the district accountable, setting up metrics, testing regularly to see progress against those metrics, reporting, and talking about and seeing how we need to adjust course.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a little bit of wrap up, I guess, Ms. Robinson, right? On
Yes.
where we will be going with this. This has been fascinating. Folks have been a bit quiet to speak, even though we have had a number
Great
of
chat.
folks on, but we've gotten some really, really great feedback coming through the chat process. And hopefully you've all seen we're paying attention to it. We just had one more: building stronger teacher and student relationships, enhance ability and competence. Amen. Healthy relationships are important and beneficial to some students who have experienced trauma. So true. And we are really concerned. It was interesting having a conversation at national level with some of our fellow school boards. I mentioned what happened in Clark County. When I brought that up with some school board members in other cities, they were addressing, for example, in Dallas and Philadelphia, Chicago, and a few others, were talking about the increased gun violence in their cities since the pandemic has started. And the trauma that the students, some students experience because of that. So Ms. Riley made that comment. You're absolutely right. A number of our students have experienced trauma in one way or another, in their home, in their neighborhood, in their transportation. And we cannot diminish or make light of the impact on that to our students and how it impacts their ability to succeed in their academic world, right, Ms. Robinson?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, we talk about what we need to do academically, but we have to do as much social emotionally to support. I mean, we've got to support the whole student, in all of their learning mechanisms, and it's not one over the other. And, and again, I agree wholeheartedly about the issue of the teacher-student relationships. I was speaking with a number of friends this weekend, and we were talking about the power of a teacher who really significantly looks after a student, sees the potential in that student, follows them up, and it gives those students that extra push. So we know our students need the adults in their lives to be ones that care about them and care about the community and the world that they're part of. Our kids live in very interesting spaces, in neighborhoods. And yes, the classroom can be a very safe space at times, but we also want teachers to acknowledge and recognize the kinds of environments our kids have. Some are more supportive than others. And when those environments aren't supportive in ways that helps the child's learning, then you need a teacher or teachers that can reach out to provide some balance and some opportunity and some support and some caring to our students as well. As I said, we are a full service school district, whole child, not just the intellect, but all of what our kids need. And, and I thank the district for what they've done during the pandemic to make sure that kids have food and Wi-Fi and all of those things, and I'm and sometimes I wonder, we needed all those things before the pandemic, but we were able to get them to happen. What else are we going to learn to know that our kids need, and that we don't want to wait for another pandemic before we begin to look at those needs and find ways of resolving them. So yes, I am hoping that this work will really get us to focus and to be honest with ourselves and each other, and to listen to the honesty of families.
Yep.
So that we do see this true partnership moving forward.
You know, Ms. Robinson, I've enjoyed this conversation with you. It's funny, as school committee members, you know,
We don't get to go.
the open meeting laws,
Yes,
right? We can never have more than, even though that's why we have 2 school committee members who have been listening tonight, but have not been participants, because that would make it 4, and we're always nervous about having a majority together. So we don't get a chance to talk together as members as often as people think that we would. And so Ms. Robinson and I have served together for a number of years, and we always learn from each other.
yes.
And I have learned listening tonight. I've learned also from the feedback that people
So much.
have either spoken or written in the chat. This is why we do these, right? So thank you for reinvigorating me. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thank you as well. Yes.
Thank you for
as
the folks who are
BPS graduates
listening.
ourselves, I said, as 2 BPS graduates from quite a while ago, I think both our personal commitment to the city and its children are critical. We know that you can get a good education in Boston, but we want to make sure that that happens for every single student. And so we know that's our charge, and we're going to really work hard to make that happen.
And we know, Ms. Robinson, it's what drives you and me both, right?
Exactly, to be
have
here.
all of the children have the opportunity that we had with our BPS education. So thank you all. If folks would like to go to bostonpublicschools.org, bostonpublicschools.org/school committee. There is a brief feedback form if you're interested in. There are going to be a number of these other sessions coming up as well. I'm doing one tomorrow with Mr. Kamani James, who is our student representative, and that is more student focused. BSAC is helping coordinate that, and we're expecting quite an attendance at that. And we know our students won't be shy, and we love hearing from them and learning from them. So that will be an engaging session. And there are a number of others coming up as well.
The 2 on Wednesday, yes.
Yep, 2 on Wednesday. I also want to make sure to thank our interpreters who worked with us this evening to provide interpretation services. Thank you as always. We're getting to know you, by the way, through
Yes.
the school committee meetings, and hopefully you're seeing we are learning to speak a little bit slower. It's kind of hard. I feel bad for you that are those are trying to interpret my Boston accent, but I'm sure you're learning over time. And my Jamaica Plain accent, and Ms. Robinson, we both have it, right? So
Yes.
right. Anyway, thank you all for participating. Ms. Robinson, do you have any closing words?
Yes. So I want to say thank you so much for taking this time to share with us today. So by April, we plan to use the feedback to update the school committee's work plan that will be used to monitor progress over the next 5 years. The entire goal and guardrail monitoring process will take place during public meetings of the school committee. So here's what you can expect next in the process. We'll continue listening, and we'll then adopt a work plan for the school committee this spring. We will also post a summary of this community input on our websites, so you can see the feedback you provided and how we use the feedback in our decision-making. If you have more to add, complete the feedback form that's posted on our webpage, bostonpublicschools.org/school committee. Your input is greatly appreciated. And so on behalf of Superintendent Caselius, the school committee, and the entire BPS family, thank you for your time.
Good night, all.
All righty, thank you.
And